Hello and welcome to Lesson 7 of this Excel Beginner series. This will be the final lesson in this beginner series, and I really want to focus on bringing together all that we've learned and covered so far and use it to produce something a bit functional. So let's have a look in more detail at today's learning objectives. So by the end of today's lesson, we'll have produced a very simple but functional budget sheet which will use most of the things that we've covered in the earliest lessons to help reinforce that learning. We're going to start from scratch today, so go ahead and open up a blank Excel sheet and I will join you when you're ready. So now we have our blank Excel workbook open. What is it that we want to create? Well, that's up to your imagination really. Excel has a lot of capability and can be used for a lot of different things. But one of the most common things that people would use it for is a personal budget tracker, so tracking your income and expenses and perhaps producing a nice chart to show your progression towards a savings goal, for example. So I think that's a good place to start. So when you start out any Excel project, it's always a good idea to have in mind what you want to end up with. So I think for this one, what we need to be able to be sure that we can track is we need to track income, and we may have a couple of categories for that. And we need to track some expenses, and we may have a number of categories for those. And what we'd like to see is the difference between what our income is and what our expenses are, and calculate whether we did well in a particular month and represent that on a chart. And also within that chart, maybe have a representation of our progression towards a savings goal. So let's start by defining those categories and tables that we're going to use to track those numbers. So let's put in some placeholders for those tables we talked about. So in cell A1, we're just going to type income. Let's leave a bit of space and go down to A10 and we'll select expenses. And what we want to be able to do is to track each of these categories perhaps on a month-by-month basis. So let's go into cell A2 and we'll type Jan for January. And in cell B2, let's type Feb. And now we have a really useful neat feature of Excel, where if we select cells A2 and B2 together, hover over the autofill kind of little square in the bottom right hand corner, which we've seen before, and if we drag this along, you can see there that it's taken a guess that we want to progress some month. And there we go, we get from January to December without having to type them all in. Now, if you simply right click and select copy, you could alternatively press Ctrl and C on your keyboard. Let's go below where it says expenses and right click and just select paste. And there we go. So we've got a placeholder for our income table and a placeholder for our expenses table. Now what we're going to need to have is some categories for both of these tables. So let's go ahead and insert a column in column A to just move this across a bit. So if you right click on A and just select insert from the drop down, we'll then shift it across and we now have space here to enter in some categories. So in cell A3, I think most people's most common category for income would be a wages category. And there may be other categories, but we'll just keep it at that for now. But we've got some space to put in other categories if they come along. And let's think about what common expenses that we may have in a household. So I think first and foremost for more people will be rent or mortgage. So let's just put in rent for now. We've got council tax, electricity, gas, water, and let's say we've got some, we like to have a bit social. We've got food, obviously, and let's just leave it at that for now. We don't want to overdo it for now. So it doesn't look very nice right now, so let's go and put in some formatting. So I think our headers here should be a slightly larger font. So if we click where it says income, we'll click the font increment here to increase the size, and let's take it up to maybe like 16. I think that's probably enough. And if we use the format painter here, click on the Format Painter, and let's just do the same for expenses. There we go. So we want to do the same, probably make the months here a little bit larger, and probably the categories as well. So if we select from cell A2 across to M2, and again, we'll just up these maybe to like 14 or something. Yeah, that looks a bit better. And again, if we click on Format Painter, we can click here and reapply those to those. So notice that it won't apply it to all of the categories here for expenses because the selection box that we had in the first instance was only 2 rows large. But what we can do now is we can just click on the rent, for example. If we double click on the Format Painter, we can then apply it to loads of cells at once by selecting them and release, and there we go. So now because we've made this font a bit bigger, the column doesn't quite keep the text in. So we'll make the column a bit wider by again clicking on the line between cell A and B in the header, double click, and it will auto resize. Notice how we've still got Format Painter selected, because when you double click on it, it stays on until you turn it off. So let's just click that to turn it off for now. So next, I think we want to tidy up these main headers, which actually apply across all of the columns. So let's merge those using the merge and center function. So again, if we select from cell B2, which is where income is, across to the end of where our dates are, and click merge and center. And it will then put this nicely in the center. Again, we can use the Format Painter option to do exactly the same thing with expenses. There we go, and that's nicely centered. So I think these categories here would be better off if they were to the right-hand side of the cell, so they were lined up with this. So again, if we click column A, and we can use the alignment function here to align them to the right-hand side of the cell. I think we'd also take this opportunity to put them in the middle of the cell vertically rather than at the bottom by using the middle align just there. There we go. So I think next we want a splash of colour maybe to make things look a bit nicer. So I think income is probably most appropriately in green. So let's just highlight from cell A1. We'll leave a gap down to the expenses. We don't want it to be right up there, so we'll do it from A1 to M9. Let's click the fill can down arrow and pick a nice green. Yeah, I quite like maybe that one there in the middle. There we go. But I don't really want these cells here in the middle filled in, so I'm just going to highlight these ones here. So these will be where we put our numerical values against our categories. And let's just click on the down arrow next to the fill can again and select no fill. But what I do want in here is a grid so that we can easily see the separation of the numbers when we put them in. So we'll click on our borders here, click on the down arrow and select all borders. And there we go, we've got a nice grid now ready to get our numbers in. So let's just format the expenses section. So this time, instead of selecting the whole lot and then making the middle bit no fill, let's just do it by selecting the top 2 rows. And I think expenses is a red category. I think this red is, oh yeah, it's okay. Let's leave it at that. And then do the same for the categories by selecting A12 downwards. Clicking on our fill can again, and there we go. And let's put our grid in for expenses, just by highlighting the area here, and putting all borders on. So all borders are still selected because we just used it. There we go, and already our sheet is starting to look a little bit better. What I don't really like is the fact that the month labels are to the left of the cell. I think they would look nicer if they were in the middle. So again, if we select where they are, and if you use the center align, yeah, it will put it in. And we'll take the opportunity to put them center vertically by using the middle align icon. Okay, and let's do the same with these. Notice you can't use the Format Painter to do this because obviously what will happen, I'll just show. If you click Format Painter now, it will then turn these cells green, which we don't want to do. We just want to change the position of the text. So let's just undo that with Control and Z. Undo can also be done by clicking the little back arrow up here at the top left next to the save icon. Let's just apply our center alignment and middle vertical alignment. And there we go, our sheet's starting to look a lot better and a lot more easy to read. So let's start entering some numbers into some of these category areas, and then we can start doing some sums to produce some results. Obviously, if you were actually using this, you would enter the numbers in as you received your income or as you spent your expenses. But for the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to fill in some numbers so that we can start using some formulas on them and producing some output. Let's start by entering our wages in for the whole year. So let's say we enter 2000. Now what we can do to save ourselves some time is we can just drag this across. And there we go. Obviously in a real world you might not have an exact number as you go across here. You might get a pay rise if you're really lucky somewhere through the year, and it would go up. And now let's look at some expenses. So our first category here is rent. So let's put in rent. Let's say we pay 900 rent. And again, we're just going to drag that across, because that should be a consistent bill. Council tax, let's say that's 80. So you can see there now that the formatting in council tax is not the same as the formatting that we had in this column. And that's because, remember, when we used the format painter, it only applied to the first two rows. So what we'll do here is we'll just take these numbers here that are under rent, and we'll select the format painter, double click on it, and just drag it over all of these other boxes. Now we'll apply the same format to all of those. And again, we'll save. So I think council tax normally changes in April, and it will go up in April, so we'll make it a 90 there. And next we've got electricity and gas. Obviously you may pay your electricity and gas as a combined bill, and they would go in together. So it would be up to you how many categories you defined, but I would always suggest keeping it at a lower number of categories for tracking purposes and making things more visible. So let's say electricity is 100, and let's say for argument's sake gas is 120. And again, we'll just drag those across. I think there's an expected increase in the UK for sure in October, so we'll make them higher there. Now obviously probably what you would expect would be to spend more on gas in particular during the winter months, but we'll just leave it like that for now. So water, it's 40 for water, and drag it all the way across. And social is probably going to be something that's variable, so let's put like, say 50 there, 60 there, 25. Let's put some silly numbers in here as well, so that we've just got something that's more difficult to add up. And if we select what's already there and then just drag it across again, it'll make up some random numbers to go in between. So you can see there that there are now some decimal numbers. We don't really want these ones that have got more than one decimal place. So if you click on the cell and then go up into the formula bar, you can just delete some numbers there. See, the numbers are not important for us right now. We just want some data in there so that we can start using them. So just go across any numbers that you have more than two decimal places, and just delete the rest of the information. Now what we could have done there was to format it as a number with two decimal places. But we'll show that in a moment when we decide to format everything else. So notice there in this cell, cell M17, we had initially, if I go and undo, we had initially 48.70. Now when we removed all of the extra numbers, it still says 48.70 in the formula bar there at the top. But once we press enter, you can see there it now only displays 48.7. And that's to do with the formatting of the cell, and we'll change that in a moment when we finished populating the rest of the numbers. So our food bill, let's say it's 120. So there we go. So we've got populated numbers in each of our areas. Let's now go and change our number formatting to make sure that the numbers are displayed exactly how we want them to. So if we highlight the numbers next to wages from cells B3 through to M3. Now what we're going to do here now is show you how to select numbers or cells that are not together. Now we haven't covered this in any earlier lessons, so this is a bit new. But now if you hold down the Control key on your keyboard and select another range, so all of these numbers here and the expenses, you can see now we can select a range that is not together. And you can do that all the time by using the Control key. Now what we want to do now is to format these numbers in a specific way. So if we go up into the number format section here at the top center, click on the little square with the arrow in it, and we're going to format these as number from the category list. We always want this 2 decimal places, so it's pounds and pence in the UK or dollars and cents in the US, wherever you are. You have this option here to use the 1000 separator. We're not going to do that. We're just going to leave it as is. And then click OK. So now you can see that all of the numbers now always have that 2 decimal places after them. Even this one here that was in cell M17, that remember went down to just 48.7, because we've now specified the number format to have 2 decimal places, it appears as 48.70. Alternatively, we could have perhaps used the accounting format here. So let me just show you what that looks like. So again, if we select our ranges and then hold down the Control button because they're not together. And if we'd selected the accounting format, we'd be able to specify the same number of decimal places, but we could put a symbol in if we wanted, so it would show as a pound. And there we go. So you can have a pound there, or we could have selected, like I said, if you were in the US, you can use there's a dollar to use, New Zealand dollars. So just show you that. There we go. It automatically changes it. But for now, I think it's just better to just leave them as ordinary numbers with 2 decimal places. We won't use the 1000 separator. And there we go. So now all of our cells are formatted now as a number. So they're much easier to manipulate, and we won't have any problems when we're doing any sums on them. So we've captured now the key raw data for this sheet, but on its own it's not really very useful. It's very difficult to tell, for example, whether we spent more than we earned in any one month. So let's go ahead now and we'll make another table called balance. And in this table we will capture the sums of our income, the sum of our expenses, and we'll do a calculation to work out whether we spent more than we earned. Now, to make the creation of this third table easy, what we're going to do is just take a copy of part of the expenses table and repaste it. So let's just take maybe like the first 3 rows of the expenses table down to electricity and all the way across there to the end. Right click, copy. Let's leave a bit of space, maybe go down to row 25, and let's just paste it there. What we want to call this table, we don't want to call it expenses, we want to call it balance. So let's just click where it says expenses. Note again, because it's centered across several rows, it's selected as one row even though it's in the middle. Let's just click in the formula bar and change that to balance. We don't want these categories here. We want to really track 3 things. So we want the sum of our income. So we'll have sum of income, sum of expense, and let's have balance. So again, notice because we've typed in more text than can fit here, we're going to have to make this column A a bit wider. So again, just go up to the little line between A and B in the header, double click on it, and it'll automatically resize. And we should really have this a different colour. We don't want this red. So let's just select the red. Let's click on the down arrow. Let's make it this yellow colour. And do the same for the categories. And let's delete all of the numbers that are in here. So you can delete everything all at once just by pressing the delete key. And there we go. So to calculate the sum of anything that's in a category, we can use the sum formula. So we just type equals sum, and we'll open brackets, and we'll select everything that's in this column B of the income table. So in this way, if we select all of these cells here, if we did add another category further down, it would automatically calculate the new sum. And we'll demonstrate that in a moment. But let's just close the bracket for now. And there we go, it tells us our sum of our income is 2,000, which is obvious from there.
Let's now calculate the sum of expenses.
We'll do that in the same way with equals sum. We will open the bracket and select all of the expenses categories in column B, close the brackets, and enter. And it now tells us that that's 1,410. And finally, the balance, which would be the sum of the income less the expenses. So we can do this with a simple formula, just typing in equals, clicking on the sum of income cell, minus the sum of expenses cell. And press enter. And there we go, we have our three calculations. So now if we select all of those that we've entered into this balance table, hover again over the little square in the corner, drag it across the rest of the table, and it will now calculate it for every month. Now before we go any further, I just want to take a bit time to revisit some of what we talked about in an earlier lesson about cell references. So I mentioned that when we created this sum of income formula in this cell here, it would calculate the sum between B3 and B8. So if we enter a new number here, for example, in cell B4, we can see there it automatically updates this formula here. And that's good. But let's just undo that for a second. So we just click undo arrow. However, it won't do the same for this expenses section, because if we check the formula here, we can see it's only going to calculate between B12 and B18. So if we added a new category here, for example, at the bottom of the table, let's put in 80 here. And if you watch now the sum of expenses total, so the sum of expenses now, it doesn't change. It doesn't automatically guess that we're going to add extra digits or numerical values into this calculation. However, what it does do is it shows you this small red triangle. And if we click now on the cell and hover over the little warning sign, we can see it's given us a warning message to say the formula in this cell refers to a range that has additional numbers adjacent to it. And what that means is that it's telling you that you're only counting between cells B12 and B18, and now you've got something in cell B19, so you might want to think about changing your formula. So that's just something good to remember.
Let's just undo that change for now and get back to where we started by clicking undo twice.
So we have most of the raw data that we would need to capture, but it would be nice to represent something visual on the sheet. So let's say we wanted to have a graph of all of our expenses showing how much we spent in each category each month. So we can do this very easily using the quick chart tool. So if we go to cell A11 and we select down to the bottom right of the table, so we're selecting both the headers of each month and the categories and all of the number in between. And if we hover over the icon in the bottom for quick analysis, we select the Charts tab, and let's go with a column chart. I think that would be most useful. Okay, there we go. So we can see a preview of it. And we can drag this out to make it look a bit bigger. And we can see there, we very quickly produced a chart which shows us by month each of our expense categories. The legend down the bottom tells us what bars represent what colour, And you can change the colour of these by simply clicking on them and then right click and then save format data series. And you can pick and choose the colours here with the fill can. So let's say we wanted our red or rent to be represented in green, for example. And there we go, and it would just change it like that. So it's nice and easy to change the look of your plot. It has no chart title at the moment, so if we just double click on the chart title and highlight it, we can then type in a name. So let's call it expenses sum and press enter. And there we go. We'll just close this bar that's opened on the right hand side here as we were formatting the chart. And we can have that sit next to our expenses block here. So we can't see it very well at the moment because it scrolls off the screen. So let's just make a bit more space so we can see it. So let's just add some extra rows here from row 20 down to row 29. Right click and insert. You'll notice there that the chart expanded as we did that. If we zoom out a bit now, so we can see our chart, grab the handle in the bottom right hand corner and we'll lift it up a bit. We'll keep it kind of long and a bit thinner, maybe out about column U. If we now zoom back in to 100%, can we see it? Yeah, not quite, but it doesn't matter, we know it's there. So what we could have is we could have that chart on a separate sheet, but we can see it simply by scrolling across now, and we can see there a very nice summary of our expenses. But what would be more useful would be, let's say we were saving towards a specific goal. So let's say, we're renting a home and we want to save for a house deposit. So this is where we're tracking this area here. So we're tracking each month how much we are saving in our balance, and we want to save towards a particular target. Like we said, maybe a house deposit. So let's just put a new category in this balance. It's not really part of the balance, but we'll just put it here to track it, and we'll call it house deposit. And this is what we're going to say a target value is. So let's say we wanted to target a value of 6,000 by the end of the year. Okay, so we have 12 months in the year. So we would do, if we did a quick calculation to say equals 6,000 divided by 12, we will see then that we need to save £500 per month. Let's just delete that for now. And we'll put in from January 500, then 1,000, and then again, if you select those two cells, drag them all the way to the end, it will continue guessing what you need to do. And this is our target value. So, and then what we need to know is our actual value that we've saved. So currently we are tracking month by month what we save each month. But this isn't going to represent how much we've saved in total. So let's add a new category called total saved. And what we're going to need to do now is to calculate how much this is accumulating on a month by month basis. Now we could do this using the following method. So if we went equals sum, opened our brackets, then clicked for January, close brackets, enter, and then in the next cell we would do equals sum, and we could pick January and February's numbers, and so on. But that would take quite a long time to do. So a better way of doing it, if we just delete that formula that's in there now, what we're actually doing is we're going to add this number here that we've saved in this month to whatever the number was that we'd saved total in the previous month. So we can put that in instead as a formula. So if we do equals the balance in February plus whatever we'd saved in January. And then if we do that for the next cell, equals the balance in March plus whatever we'd saved up to the end of February. Now if we select those two cells, we can drag it all the way to the end, and there what it's done now is to produce that cumulative sum of what we've total saved each month. And we can validate that if we simply select all of the cells from B36 to December, so everything in the balance section from January to December. Then if you go down to your summary bar there, it tells you that the sum 6979 £51, which is exactly the same number as we've got here. So let's just tidy that up a little bit by just highlighting the sum of expenses and balance rows, clicking on our format painter, and then clicking where we typed in house deposit. And there we go, we've now got the base values that we need to produce a progression chart. So we're going to have a target line on the chart, and we're going to have another set of values which shows our progression towards that. So for this chart, we're not going to need all of the data that we currently have in this table. So if you try to use the quick analysis tool with non-continuous data, so if you select this row here, 33, that's got our headers in that we would have on the axis, like we had in the chart for expenses here, and then hold down the control key, and we select the two categories for house deposit and total saved, and everything along there, you'll notice that the quick analysis tool does not appear, and that's because the range is not a continuous range. However, this doesn't stop us creating a chart from that data. So if we click on the Insert tab at the top, we hover over the Chart section, and we're going to produce a specific type of chart here, which is called a combo chart. So if we click in the bottom right hand corner, where it's going to list us all the charts, we click on the tab which says All Charts, and go right down to the bottom of the list, and we have this combo option. So a combo chart allows you to mix two types of charts. So what we're going to have here is we're going to have a target as P as a line. So we'll be tracking our house deposit as our target, which is what we're aiming for as a line. And then we'll track our total saved as bars, which will be coming up towards that line. Now you can see already what it's defaulted in our preview. It's actually defaulted the house deposit as a clustered column chart, shown here by these blue bars, and the total saved as a line. So actually, I think it would be better to have these the other way around. So simply click on the down arrow next to the type of chart, so clustered column, and pick the line chart. Now see, now we've got two lines, and then for the total saved category, we're going to click on line, and we're going to change that to a column chart. And there we go. So we can now see quite clearly each month by month how we are progressing versus the line that's on the chart. There we go. And once again, we can change the chart title simply by double clicking in it, highlight it, and we'll call it house deposit savings. Just close this sidebar that opened up. And again, you could change the formatting of this the same way I showed you with the expenses chart. Or you could, for example, change the bars to red or green depending on whether they were above or below the line. And you could do that simply by selecting an individual data point. So if you click on it once and then click on it again, you can see it's got the highlight just around that single bar. You can then right click on it, select the little fill can up here, and let's change that. So we could change that to red. Click away there. We see now only the one bar has changed, as opposed to if we just click once, we pick the whole data series. And if we right click on that and select the fill can, let's change it to green this time, you can see now that that fills in the entire data series green. So let's now just make a few changes to our data so that we can look at some of the other features that we've been through in the earlier lessons. So let's scroll up to the income table, for example, and let's change this January value to a much lower value, let's say 1000. So this is going to mean that we're going to have spent more in January than we actually earned. And we can see that if we scroll down to the balance table, that we now have a negative value in the balance row. However, it's not really clear and it doesn't stand out. So this is where conditional formatting can really come in handy. So for this whole table, let's select it. And let's go to the down arrow next to where it says conditional formatting. And let's put in a new rule. And what we want to do is you want to format only cells that contain, which is the second option, with a cell value, but we don't want it to be between a value. We want it to be anything that's less than 0. And we're going to make anything that's less than 0 a red number. So on your preview here, it shows you that there's no format currently set. So let's click the format button. Let's go to where it says font at the top there and go to the color, which is currently set on automatic. We're going to change it to this red color, and let's make it bold as well. That will help it stand out. You can see there an example of it in the preview box, and click OK. And OK. And there we go. So it now shows in glorious red now wherever we've got a negative number. And we can see now actually that will affect our graph. We can see now that in January that bar has actually dropped below the line. So just as we saw before, you would change that then, perhaps to help it stand out. Just clicking on that data point, format the data point, fill, and change it to this red. There we go, because we didn't meet the target in that month. And you can see now actually because of that reduction in the first month, that actually we are not meeting the target anywhere until almost right near the end, which I think we maybe nearly do it at the end. Yeah, it's 5979, so it's still not quite at the 6,000 target that we targeted. So actually your whole data series really should be red there, because you didn't meet the target by the end. So we failed to save our 6,000 for our house deposit. So that's how to highlight the red numbers, and instead of having boring black, why don't we make the positive numbers green? So again, if we just select the whole table again, if we go to conditional formatting on the drop down, this time we'll click manage rules because we're just going to add a rule to the existing selection. So it shows formatting rules for current selection. Let's click new rule here. Again, we'll select format cells only that contain. And this time we want a cell value if it's equal to or greater than. So there it is, greater than or equal to. And once again, we're going to say greater than or equal to 0. And this time we're going to format it. We'll make it bold again. And select a nice green from the color palette. Click OK, click OK again, and apply. And there we go. So now we can see all of our positive numbers in a nice green color and all of our reds where it's less than 0. So again, just making our data much more visual and easier to read at a glance. So there we go. In a quite short period of time, we produced an albeit very simple but fully functional budget tracker that allows us to visually see on a nice bar chart our month-by-month spend, and also allows us to track versus a savings goal on a clustered combo bar line chart.
So that concludes this section of beginner lessons. Well done if you made it this far and produced your simple budget sheet. Don't forget to save your work progress so far, and feel free to mess around with some of the things that we learned in earlier lessons on the data and charts that you now have available. As with any skill, the key to getting better is to practice. So, you can use this information that's been provided in the earlier lessons, use these sheets that we've produced to go ahead and practice a lot of the things that we've covered in the earlier lessons. And when you do feel comfortable and ready to move on, I will be producing a later series covering more detailed information about other functions and functionality of Excel. If you are having problems still in these beginner lessons, why not leave a comment in the description below the videos and I'll respond and try to help. Incidentally, if you are interested in a fully functional personal budget tracker, why not check out my Raise Digital Studio shop on Etsy where you can get one. The address is now scrolling across the ticker across the bottom of this slide. As always, if you have enjoyed this series, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for future notifications of other content. Thank you for watching.